I think one of the misfortunes of India is that our historians called the Turkic colonial rule the Islamic rule. Nobody calls the British colonial rule the Christian rule, because everyone knows the British colonial rule has nothing to do with Indian Christians. But the Turkic colonial rule is called Islamic rule, and in my mind this was a major mistake. Islam didn't come to us with the Turkic colonial people. Islam came a lot earlier.
Hello and welcome to Outlook Bibliofile. Today we have India's perhaps the only truly best-selling author, Amish, who can have stickers like this, on his book cover, which is 5 million copies sold. It's a bit like a John Grisham or a J.K. Rowling. I don't think any other Indian author can claim to have something like this on his books.
No, I'm sure Chetan can.
One or two, let's say. Yeah. It's thank you very much, Amish, for joining Outlook Bibliophile. It's a great delight to have you here. And Amish, as we know, is also somebody who made sort of Indian mythology kind of cool. It just became and it cuts through everybody. It cuts through age, young, old, rich, poor, the intellectual, the illiterate. The sweep of this Indian mythology. How were you swept by it?
You're right in a way. I'd heard this wonderful line once that no Indian hears the Ramayana for the first time. We're just born with it. True. And truly we're the oldest surviving major pagan culture, ancient culture. Most other cultures have died out, and we've survived for so long. That these stories, our culture, our gods, our goddesses, they're a part of our genes, I guess, and it's one of the things that defines us, that makes us Indian. And I think most of us Indians love, or practically all of us, love exploring different aspects of the stories of our gods and goddesses, and learning from them, celebrating their victories, and crying when they go through tragedy, and applying those lessons in our life. It truly kind of defines us, I think.
And there have been so many retellings, and yet its power remains.
It's I think one of the reasons perhaps why our culture has remained alive is our tradition of retellings. Because we keep the soul of the old, but we add in something of the new. So it keeps getting revived again and again in some ways for a new age. So in a sense we have the ideal mix of rigidity and flexibility. Look, if you're too rigid, if you're like a hard tree with strong roots, when a hurricane comes, you fall off, right? If you're too flexible like grass, then you have no astitva of your own. Anyone can walk all over you. You need a right mix of rigidity and flexibility. That's how you can survive. And I guess maybe our stories help us do that, because we have the rigidity of our ancient love for the stories, which is a part of our soul, but we keep adding in something new repeatedly, with every new age, with every new epoch.
This your new book, Raavan, you said that it's one of the darkest that you've attempted. So what kind of research goes into this?
The way I live my life is I don't do research for a book. The way I see it is whenever I'm not writing is my time for research. And I don't do research with a specific aim in mind. I just gather knowledge because I like gathering knowledge. That's it. So I keep reading, and where that knowledge will go in which book, I don't know, and I don't care. It'll go sometime, right? But I just keep gathering knowledge. That one is through the process of reading. Like I said, I read a lot.
And the reading, it's all kinds of books?
Mainly non-fiction. I don't read as much fiction. I read more non-fiction. And my favorite genres, are mythology, spirituality, science, politics, economics, so these kind of subjects. And so therefore it's not just reading. I travel a lot as well, and when I travel, I like to travel as a local. If I'm going to Kenya, I should learn some words, from there, some Maori words, I should learn some things about their local ways. Some words of some things of the Maasais there, the main tribe out there. In fact, I was fascinated by their warrior culture, and I'm sure it will come in some book somewhere. The way they the way they looked at how they created warriors in their the boys actually beyond a particular age moved away from family and lived in their own kind of warriors camp. There's no other word for it. Where they were only men, and it was a very hard warrior culture. The way I see it, like, keep learning all the time. You never know where it'll get used in some book.
And Raavan particularly, he's a very complex, controversial character. We all have various opinions about him. And so how did you approach this, particularly for this book? How did you approach this complex character? What went into, making the book?
He is a very dark character. There's no doubt about it. But I think he is different from your ordinary villain, just because he is so scholarly. He is such a complex, deep man. He is not just a violent man, right? He's a brilliant musician. He's a brilliant poet, a good dancer. He's exceptionally well read. He's a very good administrator, which makes him a very deep, complex man. Which makes him fascinating to write about, but honestly also very troubling to write about.
True.
Like, one of the things one noticed when I was writing even the violent scenes, the way it came to me, that even his violence is kind of scholarly. How does one explain that? It's not just someone who takes a club and smashes someone's head in and that's it. Like, he will actually behead someone and then look closely at the gaping neck. How's the blood spurting out? What are the veins? It's like, for him, even that is a path to knowledge. It's very disturbing. In some ways. So.
And do you think in our popular culture, he's been reduced to a very sort of a mono kind of color?
Not just him. Sadly, our popular culture itself, we have lost so much of the depth and nuance of our ancestors. And I lay the fault of this completely at our education system. We teach very little about our ancient culture, our ancient texts, traditional plays. We teach very little, and in an atmosphere of ignorance, then half-baked knowledge will prosper, which is sad. And one can't blame students or count people for it, because no one is teaching them. No, the education system is not teaching them.
There is this feeling that that our past was all great, and that we should go.
No,
we should go. So that is what we should. So there is a whole history in between, which is, it's seeming to be like sort of wiped out. I mean, which ancient are we talking about? I mean, which period are you talking about? Is there a period that you have in mind, or
from ancient times till today? So yes, there are there is a painful part of invasions as well, and we should speak of it honestly, because it has nothing to do with people today. I think one of the misfortunes of India is that our historians called the Turkic colonial rule the Islamic rule. Nobody calls the British colonial rule the Christian rule, because everyone knows the British colonial rule has nothing to do with Indian Christians. But the Turkic colonial rule is called Islamic rule. And in my mind, this was a major mistake. Islam didn't come to us with the Turkic colonial people. Islam came a lot earlier. In fact, the second oldest mosque in the world is actually in India. Most people don't know this. And the Turkic colonial rulers, which is what the Delhi Sultans were, you read the list of nobles, you will find no Indian Muslims also in there. They were all Uzbek and basically all Turks, and their administrators were all Persians. But that's not the impression that's given to us in our history books, and we have created a problem for ourselves with this. So we should look at our invasions also honestly, but we must realize that Indian Christianity and Indian Islam actually came to us a lot earlier, and that's I find very few cultures which do this deliberately and consciously, that keep denying everything about our own past. Poetry classes will have nothing on Mirza Ghalib. How can you have a poetry class and not speak of Mirza Ghalib? And what is wrong with us? How can you? Why should Thiruvalluvar not be taught in schools in UP and Bihar? How will we build a national consciousness? Why should Bhasa was from the north? Why should he not be taught in Kerala and Tamil Nadu? But we are very happy to teach Westerners, but we don't teach, Indians of different regions to each other. Why should the stories of Lachit Borphukan not be celebrated in Gujarat, Maharashtra? Why should the stories of the Gurjar Pratiharas not be celebrated in the Northeast? How will we build a national culture till we celebrate our own heroes, our own thinkers, our own heroines, and so much? We just don't do it.
Only sometimes, it can go to some fantastical sort of levels, when we start saying that, there was plastic surgery in our ancient time, or test tube babies were born, or, we had missile technology. So, that is when I think the problematic part starts.
Test tube babies and missile technology is clearly fantasy. There is no credible evidence to back that. Plastic surgery there is actually. The first recorded rhinoplasty, which is the nose reconstruction surgery in the modern era, was recorded in a British magazine by British soldiers who saw the procedure being done on a soldier of the Maratha army. The procedure that surgeon followed was the exact same procedure that was spoken of by Shushruta 1,000 years ago. So that is actually credible. Now, Satish, I know you're very well read, but my point is this, that it's not your fault. The education system is not teaching these to you.
Actually,
and then what happens? Is many genuine achievements get merged with fantasies.
That's what
Okay, and the solution to both of them is knowledge.
Yeah. So that is, I wasn't. What I meant was that as you just said, that this half-baked kind of knowledge, that when you start saying some start claiming really sort of bizarre kind of things,
rather than taking just getting lost in the achievements of our ancestors and beating our chest about it, what I would like is we should take inspiration that relative to the rest of the world, our ancestors had massive achievements. They were really kick-ass, but where are we relative to the rest of the world? So what we should be doing is learning that knowledge, imbibing that pride, and working hard to make achievements today which will make our ancestors proud. That would be the best conversation to get into, and the answer honestly is knowledge. Fantasies and ignorance prosper in an atmosphere which doesn't have knowledge. The answer is the light of knowledge.
And as you also said, in the prevailing sort of political atmosphere, everything it kind of gets a bit lost in this extreme right and extreme left, sort of arguments. So there is no middle core, which, as you pointed out, is probably the largest, majority of our country. But it just seems to be getting lost in this two fringe, is it?
This is, I never comment on politics, that, and this is not my comment on politics, because politicians, it's their job to do what they have to do to get votes. And let's not, India is a very difficult country. So, in fact, I have a lot of respect for our politicians across all political classes, because India is a very difficult country. And to make this run somehow is not an easy job. So, actually, I have respect for them. My thing is more on the public debate space. The public debate space has sadly been captured by two groups of extremists. The left-wing extremists who want to deride anything about our past, who don't want to talk of religion or our spirituality or our achievements at all, and the right-wing extremists who think we were the only great people, everyone else was a bunch of monkeys. That's not true either, And perhaps the problem is, I genuinely believe that a vast majority of us Indians are in the center. But perhaps the problem is we don't speak loudly enough. Perhaps most of us just get irritated by the debate that's happening, and we're like, I don't want to be a part of this. So I don't know what the solution is to that debate, but I know that at least those of us who are in the center must speak more, must convey our thoughts, but must always do it politely and calmly. Let's not add to the nonsense that's going on in any case. So we must always be polite, always be calm, but always be deeply proud and deeply liberal. We must be Indian, the way our ancestors would have wanted us to.
Amish, there is also this belief, or some people in some quarters, let's say, that going back to our past is somehow at variance, with this liberal thought of which is what is more equated with the Western thought. How would you react to that?
I think there's a reason why liberalism is losing the argument, and I think it's a little sad, because if there's a point in time when the world truly needs liberalism, it's today. But often the biggest enemies of liberalism are the liberals themselves. One is of course through hypocrisy, but the other is that they don't truly understand the land that they're in. You know, if you want to have an impact on a land, you have to speak in an idiom and with a culture that resonates with that land, right? I mean, 99.999% of us Indians, we do not resonate with the West. We resonate with our soil, with our great land. So you have to use arguments which connect here, right? And fortunately, we don't have to make things up. You know, our ancestors were genuinely liberal. You only have to read our ancient texts to know that. And I've said this often enough that sadly, modern Indian liberals, at least the elite liberals, don't realize our ancient culture is actually their biggest ally. But they haven't read many of the ancient texts. They read largely Western texts. So therefore, they don't know this. You know, if we, you know, the various versions, the ancient versions of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, the plays of Kalidasa, Bhasa, of Shudraka, you know, it'll have such a huge impact, positive impact. And I'm not saying it's just a Hindu thing. The Buddhist interpretations, the Jain interpretations, the Sikh interpretations, the Indian Islamic interpretations. Only an Indian Muslim could have said, या तो मस्जिद में शराब पीने दे साकी, या ऐसी जगह बता जहाँ खुदा ना हो.
Going ahead, I know you leave you know, clues in your books, and your ardent fans sort of know what your next book is going to be, etc. But I was just curious, would you, after this, say, you know, after a little while, would you also touch upon, say, the Mahabharata?
Yeah. So I have a story idea in mind for the Mahabharata. I also have a story idea in mind for Lord Brahma, Lord Rudra, Lady Mohini, the rise of the Asuras. You know, various story ideas in mind, and if Lord Shiva allows it, hopefully I'll write all of them.
Thank you very much, Amish.
Thank you.
It's a delight to have you in Bibliophile. Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
Your time.